Welcome to Recogs, the inventory success podcast where we discuss how the top operators source, manufacture, finance, and sell their inventory in order to create successful businesses. I'm your host, Mike Gelb. I'm the community manager here at Manufactured. Manufactured is the inventory success platform for consumer and B2B companies. What do we mean when we say inventory success? Well, we help SMBs manufacture, finance, and distribute their products across 20 categories. Looking to help reduce your COGS, or looking for inventory financing help, or selling in new channels, we're happy to see if we can help at manufactured.com. Now, I know this is a free podcast, and why we have this podcast is we wanted to focus on the nuts and bolts when it came to operations and inventory side to building consumer brands. And if this is helpful, we have a favor. If you're enjoying the show, can you please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to this content so you don't miss when the next episode is? That'd be amazing. If you could also leave us a review on the Apple Podcast, that would really mean a lot. We not only produce content devoted towards SMBs, but we also throw events to help foster community around the US. So to subscribe, to be in the know when our next event is in your area, click in the show notes. That's where the link is. The link is also manufactured.com/events. Our guest today is Erica Bethe Levin, who is the founder and CEO of Globowl. Globowl makes delicious and nutritious baby and toddler food. We discuss how she discovered that there was a market here within baby and toddler food and why the proposition of Globowl was a great proposition, her approach to finding the right manufacturer, how she also thought about financing her growth and was able to get into retail and also new retail stores, as well as her entire expansion plan. This is a really fun conversation about food, about babies, and also the next generation. Without further ado, here's Erica. Erica, thank you so much for joining me here today. How are you?
I'm good, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Really great. Really excited to be speaking with you and about Globowl. This is gonna be great. Tell me. I know that you came on for a webinar. Oh, did I freeze? Oh, you froze too. Oh shoot. Weird. Hello, can you hear me? Am I unfrozen? All right, cool. Look, we can restart if that's cool with you. Erica, thank you so much for joining me here today. How are you? Oh, thanks. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm great. Thanks. Looking forward to hearing everything about Globowl. I know you came on our webinar last year and excited to do, a full-on episode with you and hear about everything that's exciting on Globowl. It'll be great. So tell me a little bit about the founding story. Why did you decide to start Globowl?
Great question. I was very much inspired by my children. I have two little ones, and the way I fed my first was very plain, like mushy, kind of pureed fruits and veggies and things. And he just became such a picky eater. I didn't give him any adventurous food, despite my pediatrician telling me to. And so with our second, we just said, we can't have another picky eater. So we just decided to feed her whatever it was that we were eating. And so her very first food was coconut shrimp curry. And that same week she had pesto, pasta, she had saffron, she had all these amazing dishes and flavors, and she just loved it all. And there's something to this. And then I just started doing a lot of research and seeing kids actually do have what they refer to as a flavor window between 4 and 18 months of age. And it's during that time that you can most easily influence the way your child eats, for the rest of their lives. So I wanted to make sure I took advantage of that flavor window. And I said, this is the way kids should be eating. This is what my doctor told me to do the first time. And so I realized that there were probably a lot of other parents in the same boat. So that's where it came from.
That's amazing. I mean, I also have two kids, and I feel like I'm in kind of the same boat too. Like my eldest also kind of more plain when it comes to and can be quite a picky eater. And my youngest, I mean, and maybe it's the youngest, maybe it's just her personality or taste, but she'll eat you throw kind of anything at her when it comes to things that are very flavorful, and she'll just down it, or at least be interested and really and at least want to go back for more.
No, that's phenomenal. And also, I think first-time parents, we're a little bit more hesitant. We're just nervous about everything. And so I think probably with first kids, we're more hesitant to give them that texture, that flavor, that spice. And by the second kid, we're pros. And so, we're more confident and I think more willing to do things a little differently.
100% at daycare. Sorry, this is just a random story, but I think relevant at just about shaping your child's maybe what they like and what they dislike very early on in age. There was in our daycare. There's the father is of one of the kids that my daughter loves. The father is of Indian descent and his family is Indian, and the mother is Caucasian American, and it's interesting because the dad's mom and dad who are both Indian come over and cook every night, like or all the time, Indian food for everybody and for the kids. And they were telling me how their kids are so used to flavor, like because of course Indian food, it's so rich in flavor, right? You have curries, you have all these lovely spices, and I love Indian food. You have all this richness in the actual food that actually, when they have bland food or just kind of normal food, they're like, I want something flavorful. And I'm like, wow, that is so fascinating.
That's actually interesting because my pediatrician is also Indian and a very dear friend. And she was telling me that she grew up eating traditional Indian food, like from the very, very beginning. And that's what she encouraged me to do with my both of my children, but especially my first. And I didn't heed the advice because I was still a little bit nervous, And so, and I blame myself for him being so picky.
Well, it's also hard too, right? If you're making, just because it's a lot to also prepare as well, right? Because there's so much flavor, there's so much ingredients, there's so much stuff as well. But boy, it is tasty. I absolutely love it. So okay, so you figured out, okay, I want to create food for toddlers during this flavor window, right? Of this like 4 to 18 months, right? Of really understanding, really them introducing flavors. What was then? Because of course, building a food CPG brand, it's incredibly challenging.
Understatement of the year.
Yeah, and I certainly have like a ton of empathy for what you do and what other founders do. Where did you find was the first SKU or the first product that you actually wanted to create?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm a cook, not not a trained chef, but a cook, and I make dinner almost every single night. And so I love the idea of my kids trying different things. So I kind of taste tested with them, not my son, but with my daughter. Saw what they liked. I asked a lot of moms. I did a lot of kind of market research on that, and we're able to come up with like really kind of 4 recipes at the same time. And those ended up being the veggie tikka masala. We have a pad thai for tots. And we have a yasmeti bowl, which is kind of like a hummus, and a baby spices bean bowl. So sort of like a chili for children. Those were kind of the winners as I tested them, tasted them with my child, and also in conversations with other parents. So that's where we started.
So we're starting with 4 SKUs, is that right?
Yes.
So then what? How did you think about? I understood that those were kind of the favorites, and you kind of help perfected each SKU, I guess, with the critical feedback of children, right? But what was the? But how did you then take that and actually find maybe a manufacturer, or did the manufacturing where it actually then could be a commercially viable, a scalable business?
Great question. So the very first thing I did was find a chef, a developer, a recipe developer, who could take, my ideas and, maybe some of the recipes, although I think he really primarily came up with it himself. And he had CPG experience. So he's a classically trained chef. He worked at such amazing esteemed places as Charlie Trotter's, but then went and ended up leaving that, the hospitality industry to go in-house to build CPG products for big companies like Kraft and Unilever. So I knew he had the proper experience. He knew how to make things shelf stable without the use of any preservatives. So we did testing together, and he cooked everything, and I would try the samples until we felt like the recipe tasted great and exactly where we wanted it to be. And then at that point, we actually started cooking at a kitchen space here in Chicago, and that those batches were used primarily for farmers markets and street festivals and things like that, just to meet the consumer and talk to them and share with them and get their feedback. And then finding a manufacturer was actually one of the more challenging things, I think, in this entire business, because when you try to find a commercial manufacturer, co-man, they have minimum order quantities. They want to work with brands that are established or that they know there's longevity with, right? It's they don't love, hearing from a startup founder, that this is my first production run. It doesn't feel like it's that interesting to them. So I had to kiss a lot of frogs and make a lot of phone calls, and ultimately went through 2 other co-mans before I found the one I have now. And that came from a referral from a friend in the industry. And I got really lucky because it is not easy to obtain a manufacturer.
So Erica, I know, obviously the relationship between brands and co-manufacturers, it obviously it's a partnership. At the same time, co-manufacturers, of course, the minimum order quantities, they want it to be raised. And then, of course, the brand, especially a new brand wants those minimum order quantities to be, lower, just to see if they actually have, a viable product. And also what we had a contract manufacturer on the podcast too. And what he was saying that can be sometimes tough is a brand might come to him or, co-manufacturers in general and say, hey, here's my product. It's, absolutely delicious and incredible. And then you look at the ingredients list and you look at the actual how the product is actually made and formulated. It actually would be actually pretty complex to scale. Did you run into that problem at all when you actually were interviewing manufacturers and actually got manufacturers to produce your product?
We actually did run into that issue. Our pad thai for tots had, I want to say, 28 or 30 ingredients in it. It's a complicated dish in general, right? The sauce alone of pad thai has a lot of ingredients, and so it was a little bit too complicated, and we did have to simplify it. So we actually, you really look at your co-man as a partner in this business, because you can't do it without them, and I guess they can keep their business without us, but but it really is a true partnership. And so they worked with us, advising on what they thought we should do to the recipes in conjunction with our chef developer, Chef Dan. And we were able to basically remove some of the more complicated, hard to get, very expensive, very unique ingredients. Our ingredients are expensive in general because we use all organic ingredients. But being able to remove maybe some of those coconut aminos and some of the harder to access, harder to get ingredients, and simplify it, which from a COGS perspective was obviously a win for us, and from a manufacturing perspective was also a win because it was easier. It was easier for the production run, and it was easier for the co-man.
What were the reasons why you actually had to change co-mans a couple times?
Well, one co-man basically just wasn't treating us with the respect that I would have liked. We were being treated as a very small brand, which we are, I get it, but constantly being pushed. We had a run date set. My entire sort of schedule was in line with that production date, and investment dollars were aligned with it, and they pushed it 6 months to accommodate 6 months, not 6 days, to accommodate like a large client, and they did that like twice. So I decided to move, and then the second co-man was wonderful, but it was very small, and I don't think he thought we were going to grow as quickly as we were and could it, which is a good problem for us to have, but it was more than he could handle. And so we both decided like it probably just wasn't the right partnership. But that was a wonderful relationship. And, I wished it could have worked out. And then I found this facility that it can process, it can accommodate, it has the capability to accommodate kind of the volume that we need at this point. And they have every capability we could ever ask for in a co-man. So we got pretty lucky.
What's like the setup in terms of like your relationship between you and your your manufacturer? Is it more turnkey? Is it that, hey,
Yes.
here are the product? It is. Okay.
It's
Um,
100% turnkey. Yeah. So they
100%
helped us with
turnkey.
sourcing. I mean, we had done, because we weren't working with them, we had been working in a non-turnkey environment. We had been doing our own sourcing and, had a lot of resources in place. But working with this co-man also afforded us the opportunity to add on to current orders that they were already doing for other clients, so if they're buying, tomatoes already, right? You get a better price than if they were only buying the tomatoes for you, right? Economies of scale. So a lot of that was great, that we were able to kind of be at a bigger facility that had more clients and more, economies of scale. And so that was a win as well.
Yeah, I mean, also, I'd imagine it's also less hiring on your side too, right? Then you don't have a person that's then responsible for the actual sourcing all the raw ingredients, and then making sure that those are delivered properly on time to the manufacturer, or they're actually stored in the correct location. So from a headcount perspective, totally also makes sense that it's turnkey. How did you, from the beginning? How did you approach your distribution channels? Did you decide to start D2C and scale the brand that way? Was it looking as well towards retail partners very, very early? What was your overall kind of go to market strategy?
So our go to market strategy, that I love that question, because I feel like a go-to-market strategy is just it's difficult, right? It's really hard to kind of figure out how you want to go about that. What's the most strategic way? What's going to gather the most consumers? But we always believe that this is a retail-ready brand, that we want to sit on shelves. That there's a confidence that buyers, especially parents, have if they are able to go to a store they trust and see us on the shelf, right? Especially, as it pertains to feeding their child, right? One of the most important things you can do. And so there's trust and validation by being in a trusted store. We do have a D2C platform. We have it because we have to. It's really not our business model at all. So it's all retail, and then it's also online retailers as well. So like in the natural channel. So we've got Thrive Market, and then we are also on Amazon.
That's great. And on the retail side of it, what got retailers excited about Global? How were you able to maybe pitch a Global successful in order to get into retail?
Yeah, I think pitching in general and selling is a forte of mine. So, that's kind of a big part of my focus on a day-to-day basis now is kind of the pitching and the sales. But we kind of narrowed it down. We're a very different kind of baby food, right? We're feeding kids the way the rest of the world really feeds kids, which is eating what the family eats. It's texture, it's flavor, it's spice. But there's other things that make us very different. So we also are a textured baby food. So we're teaching kids important oral motor development skills, right? That you don't get from pouches and drinking pouches, right? Kids aren't learning how to chew or swallow properly. It leads to texture aversions. It can lead to cavities or overconsumption because you don't get the cues that your tummy's full. So we have to explain these, we call them the 4 tenets of the global difference. And so it's that early allergen introduction as well. We do, unlike the rest of the baby foods that have really sanitized their products of all allergens and a lot of flavor, by the way, that's really become a source of responsibility for kind of this picky eating, multiple generations of picky eating kids with food allergies, right? Is kind of the fact that we've just sterilized baby food so much. And so we want to feed, like I said, like the rest of the world does, which is adding allergens back in. Don't strip them out, because it's scientifically proven to reduce the likelihood of food allergies if you expose kids early, right? So that's the third tenet of the global difference. And then the fourth is that we are also in glass jars versus these drinkable, squeezable, single-use plastic pouches, which the glass jars contain, no microplastics or nanoplastics, which is a real issue, that kids consume these while they're eating out of plastic or drinking out of plastic. And it's also sustainable. So by really honing in on our 4 main differences and being able to vocalize that and verbalize that to the buyers, I think has been really helpful.
Totally agree with you, and that's great. Totally agree with you in terms of allergens and introducing allergens, early on. Because if you introduce them too late, I mean, it makes sense. Then your body might, develop an allergy to it just because it's unknown to them. So totally agree with you, and also as well, introduce it so that you actually can know as well if your kid does have an allergy, right? So then you're okay, great, okay, let's just not, then you can't have that. So totally agree with you from that standpoint. Has it when you think about like the grocery aisle as well and like differentiation, where do global products typically sit? Because I'd imagine that they sit close to these other brands, so some of the other brands that you're kind of differentiating against, with with the purees, for example, and kind of maybe some of the brands that are allergen free. How do you think about the merchandise side and also where actually it makes sense for Global to sit in the grocery store?
Yeah, I mean the jars they sit amongst all of our competitors, right? So they sit amongst all of the plastic pouches. So in some ways, in a lot of ways, that's good, right? We look different, right? It's kind of interesting to see something that's a little bit not like the others. The messaging is super important. Like we spent obviously so much time on the labels and what message are we trying to relay to the customer? There's education that needs to be communicated to the consumer because this is a different way of feeding kids. And when I say different, I mean different than what store-bought baby food has been now for the last, you know, 25-ish years, I guess, 20-ish years. So I think the messaging on the label is extremely important. Working with the stores on messaging, if there's opportunities for actual, collateral on the shelves and things like that, to educate a little bit further. And again, physically, it's differentiated. So I think that it draws people in. And we were also very selective with our colors, making sure that they popped and making sure that they relayed the energy of the brand and caused excitement so people would be inclined to pick it up.
How did you approach pricing from the beginning? I think what seems really, a great insight from you early is that, hey, if this is going to work, it's going to be a retail first brand. So I guess that you're kind of pricing yourselves in order for, and looking at your margin structure as well, that, hey, this is going to be a predominantly wholesale business. But if you can break us down a little bit in terms of how you thought about pricing from the beginning and making sure that there was enough there that that this would be a great wholesale business, but also not being too expensive as well for the consumer, because that's of course one of the many difficult things when it comes to building brands.
Yeah, I mean, price makes or breaks a business, right? So I wanted to think, what is the ultimate price a customer would pay for this product, right? And I took into account the four tenets that make us different, right? And those all qualify it as a premium product. The glass jar, the organic ingredients, cooked, developed by Michelin star chefs, like all this stuff that would make it a premium product. So I knew I did interviewing and market research. What would parents be willing to pay, right? And for a product like ours in a glass jar, the pricing kind of ranged from $3.99 to about $7.99, and so I wanted to be somewhere in there, but closer to the lower end. So I had to back into it. I had to look at what our COGS were right after finalizing what those look like with our co-man. I know what I need to make to have a viable business. I know the margin I need personally, like what the company needs. I know what the margin is that the distributor takes, right? So I was able to take those numbers and analyze them and get to the point where we landed at a $5.99 on shelf price point. And that also, by the way, allows for the retailers to make the margin that they want. A lot of people need their margins in here, so.
Why was the glass jar the right packaging form factor?
Because I mean, kids, like I said, kids should not be drinking food, right? They should be chewing it. And the only way, to allow that would be in a vessel like a bowl, right? Whether it's glass or plastic or whatever. But I wasn't about to give children plastic as an option. Glass felt a more sustainable choice. It's recyclable, reusable, upcycled. People use them afterwards. They're, great size little jars. They use them for honeys and jams and Legos and nuts and bolts. I mean, use them for whatever you want. But most importantly, if you read any of these kind of studies on how much plastic we as human beings are consuming on a day-to-day basis, you'd be very, very alarmed. And kids are consuming about a credit card size amount of micro and nanoplastics per week. I wasn't going to contribute to that problem. Yeah, it's not healthy, right? And then, the plastic, it leaches into the food. Also, we were not going to use any preservatives, no artificial preservatives. And so we needed to utilize a cooking process that is very hot, so we needed glass jars to sustain some of that heat.
How did you think about retail expansion and getting into more doors? Is that versus making sure that doors you're already in, you're kind of serving and getting those velocities at the right speed that you need to?
Yeah, I mean, I have an amazing advisory board. This is my third startup, but it's my first one in CPG. So really surrounding myself with the right people who can help me make these decisions, who have been there, done that sort of thing. So I relied a lot on advice from people that are, smarter than I and more experienced. So, in talking to them, it really made sense for us to want to go deeper in our stores versus wider. And so instead of, and every brand will do this differently. Like, we decided for us, the first year should be focused on the natural channel versus conventional. Whereas some brands will say, I want to start in the Northeast, or I want to start in the South, or I want to start kind of where I'm headquartered. We don't really care about that, but the store has to be shopped by the right consumer, right? And the natural channel felt right for us. And so in those retailers, in the natural segment, we really wanted to get our bearings. What's working in terms of promos. What SKUs are performing the best. What are our velocities, and how do I increase those? And so really trying to get our learnings early on was something that we wanted to do, while also feeling like if we were to make a mistake or learn something at a 10 store chain versus a 500 store chain or 1,000 store chain just kind of made more sense to us. So we just wanted to go, and then we wanted to, continue growing our sales in those stores before we started expanding. So we are expanding. I mean, we've only been selling for 6 months in stores, but we are, we're increasing our velocities every day. Our stores are doubling their orders now, and some even more than that. So, what we're doing is working, and then we can then take those learnings and basically copy paste as we expand into new stores and even into the more conventional channel.
As you're expanding, as you're getting into more stores, how do you also think about buying the actual inventory itself, and even financing the business? I mean, I think that's one of the incredibly, on the list of incredibly a huge challenge for inventory businesses, especially on the B2B retail side of it, because of course you have, net 90 terms and what have you. How do you think about buying that actual inventory and actually managing your working capital so the business still functions?
Yeah, no, great question, and something I think about every single day, every waking moment, and even every sleeping moment. But I would say when you ask the question, like net 90, like on a good day, right? I mean, it takes longer than that a lot of times to get paid, right? So you have to understand your payment cycle. You have to understand your sales cycle. Like there's a lot that's different about a inventory-based business or, a product-based business than there is in any other kind. And everything I've done before has been on definitely all in the food space, but on the more technology side. So that has definitely, been a huge learning curve for me. But the way, we raised investment money from the very beginning. So we had cash in the bank, but that goes very quickly, let me tell you, especially when you're developing a product and you have to make payments and upfront, right? You're paying before you're getting paid, which is challenging. So we raised money. I apply for every grant I can ever apply for, and I encourage everyone to do the same. I mean, there's so much free money out there. That's the best kind of money, is free money. So investments in grants and there's also, I've taken out a couple loans. I mean, it's an expensive venture. There is, PO financing, which is great, taking that PO over, to the bank or wherever you need it, or a PO firm, not a PO firm, but you know what I mean, a PEO financing sort of situation, which there's a lot of firms that do that as well, or inventory financing, which I haven't done yet, but all are in the plans so that I can have, clean cap table and sort of make it so that the company has more value as we go after next rounds of funding.
I appreciate you talking about funding for inventory itself, and then also funding about the entire business, and also having, a clean capital. So if you do need to fundraise, then it actually is, clean, and it's not like, a ton of investors, and to make sure as well that that of course you're satisfied with how much the company that you own. My final question to you: what would you value more, $100 of inventory, $100 of Globowl, or $100 of cash?
I mean, we all need cash, but of course, I'm going to say Globowl, of course. I mean, every parent needs Globowl.
Love it. No, that's great. There isn't a right answer for this question, but that kind of is the right answer for this question.
Yeah. If it's not, you're in the wrong business.
Erica, thank you so much for your time. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, it's over. I had so much fun. Time flies.
And there you have it. It was great chatting with Erica. Erica, thanks again for your time. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe on whichever platform that you're listening on, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, or another one. We don't just do content as well. We also throw events. So if you want to check out our events at manufacture.com/events and sign up to our list, we'll notify you when we're next in your area. Thanks again for listening. I hope this is helpful, and have a good one.